What happens when an entire galaxy mistakes kindness for weakness? When advanced alien civilizations see humanity's diplomacy as cowardice and our peaceful nature as submission? They made the fatal error of thinking that because we chose peace, we had forgotten how to wage war. For 3 centuries, humanity had been the galaxy's quiet neighbor, trading, exploring, building. We sent ambassadors instead of armies, offered aid instead of conquest. The Hegemony Council watched us with amusement, seeing nothing more than a young species trying to find its place among the stars. They were about to learn why Earth's history books are written in blood, and why our greatest monsters were never the ones that lurked in shadows, they were the ones we became when pushed too far. This is the story of how humanity reminded the galaxy of a simple truth: sometimes the most dangerous predator is the one that chooses not to hunt, until it has no other choice. Ambassador Sarah Chen stood in the Grand Chamber of the Hegemony Council, her hands clasped behind her back as she watched the alien delegates shuffle through their seats with the casual arrogance of those who had never known defeat. The crystal spires of the council chamber stretched impossibly high above them, each one representing a different member species of the galactic community. Humanity's modest pillars stood near the back, barely reaching the height of the others' bases. The humans wished to speak again, announced Primarch Vexai, his 6 arms gesturing dismissively as his serpentine body coiled around the central speaking platform. The Nitharian's scaled hide gleamed under the chamber's artificial starlight, and his voice carried the kind of bored contempt reserved for particularly tedious insects. How refreshing! Sarah maintained her composure, though she could feel the weight of 300 pairs of alien eyes studying her with everything from mild curiosity to open disdain. She had served as Earth's representative for 15 years, long enough to understand exactly where humanity stood in the galactic hierarchy. They were the newcomers, the primitives who had barely learned to travel between stars while others had been building empires for millennia. Honored counselors, she began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's advanced acoustics, I come before you today to address the growing tensions in the Outer Rim territories. Human colonies are reporting increased raids by unknown vessels. Our cargo ships are disappearing, our mining operations are being attacked, and our people are being taken. A low rumble of what might have been laughter rippled through the assembly. Councillor Thektar, whose crystalline form reflected light in prismatic patterns, spoke without rising from his seat. The humans complain of raiders again. Perhaps if your species had not spread so thin, so quickly, you would not find yourselves so vulnerable. We're not asking for military intervention, Sarah continued, fighting to keep frustration from her voice. We're simply requesting the Council's assistance in identifying these attackers and opening diplomatic channels. Surely there's a peaceful resolution to peaceful resolution. The words came from Admiral Karath, the Hegemony's military commander. His massive frame, evolved from predatory hunters on a high-gravity world, dwarfed most other species in the chamber. Always, the humans speak of peace. Peace when the Zektai Empire refuses their trade agreements. Peace when the outer colonies rebel against council authority. Peace when pirates raid their poorly defended worlds. He rose to his full height, nearly 3 meters of scarred chitin and battle-hardened muscle. Perhaps the problem is not the raiders, Ambassador Chen. Perhaps the problem is a species that has forgotten the first rule of survival: the strong take what they will, and the weak suffer what they must. Sarah felt her jaw tighten. With respect, Admiral, humanity has always believed that strength without wisdom is mere brutality. We've chosen to build rather than conquer, to trade rather than raid. And how has that served you? Asked Counselor Zeph Mora, her feminine voice carrying the musical quality of her avian species. Your colonies cry for help while you offer olive branches to those who would see them burn. Your merchant ships disappear while you draft treaties with empty space. Your people die while you practice diplomacy with ghosts. The chamber erupted in what Sarah had learned to recognize as alien laughter. Some species clicked, others hummed, and a few simply flashed bioluminescent patterns. But the meaning was universal: mockery. Primarch Vexai raised one of his 6 arms, and silence fell immediately. The Council has heard your petition, Ambassador Chen. We will take it under advisement. His forked tongue flicked out, tasting the air. However, perhaps it is time for humanity to consider a different approach to these difficulties. What do you mean? Sarah asked, though something cold was already forming in her stomach. The Zektai Empire has expressed interest in expanding their sphere of influence, the Primarch explained with what might have been a smile on his reptilian features. They believed the human colonies would be more secure under their protection. For a reasonable tribute, of course. Sarah's composure finally cracked. You're suggesting we surrender our sovereignty to an empire that's been raiding our shipping for the past 6 months? I'm suggesting you accept reality, Admiral Korath interjected, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. Your species numbers fewer than 50 billion across 12 worlds. The Zektai Empire commands 300 billion warriors across 800 systems. They could conquer your entire civilization before your parliament finishes debating whether to send a strongly worded letter. But they're offering peaceful annexation, added Councillor Thektar, his crystalline form chiming softly as he gestured. Think of it as graduation. From a minor independent state to a protected province of a true galactic power. Sarah looked around the chamber, searching for even one sympathetic face among the assembled delegates. She found none. These beings had watched humanity struggle and grow for 3 centuries, had seen their desperate attempts to find a place in galactic society, their efforts to build relationships based on mutual respect rather than fear. And, now, when humanity needed them most, they were being told to submit or be conquered. And, if we refuse, she asked quietly. Primarch Vexhai's tongue flicked out again. Then, you face the consequences of that refusal alone. The Hegemony Council cannot protect those who refuse to protect themselves. The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah could hear her own heartbeat, could feel the weight of history pressing down on her shoulders. 300 years of careful diplomacy, of building trust and relationships, of proving that humanity deserved a place among the stars. All of it reduced to this moment, this choice between submission and abandonment. I need to consult with my government, she said finally. Of course, the Primarch replied, but his tone suggested the consultation was a mere formality. The Zektai have graciously agreed to delay their expansion for 72 Earth hours while you deliberate. Sarah bowed formally to the assembly, then turned and walked from the chamber. Behind her, the low buzz of alien conversation resumed, and she caught fragments of different languages discussing trade routes, mining rights, and territorial divisions. They were already carving up human space in their minds. The corridors of the council station stretched for kilometers, a testament to the architectural ambitions of species who measured time in geological epochs rather than generations. Sarah's footsteps echoed in the vast spaces as she made her way to the human diplomatic section, past windows that showed the swirling nebulae and distant stars of the galactic core. Her aide, Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez, was waiting in the communications center with a tight expression on his weathered face. How bad? He asked without preamble. Worse than we thought, Sarah replied, sinking into the chair across from the quantum communicator. They're not just ignoring our requests for help. They're actively facilitating our conquest. Rodriguez cursed under his breath in Spanish, then caught himself. Sorry, Ambassador. Don't be. I'm thinking much worse things. She activated the communicator, watching as the device established a connection across the hundreds of light-years between the Council Station and Earth. Priority 1 communication to the Secretary General. Full encryption. The holographic interface flickered to life, and, after a few moments, the tired face of Secretary General Hassan appeared. His dark hair was more silver now than it had been when Sarah had last seen him in person, and the lines around his eyes spoke of too many late nights and impossible decisions. Sarah, he said, relief evident in his voice. Please tell me you have good news. I'm afraid not, sir. She quickly outlined the Council's position, the Zektai ultimatum, and the complete lack of support from their supposed galactic neighbors. Hassan's expression grew darker with each detail. 72 hours, he said finally. They're not even pretending this is about justice or galactic law. It's pure power politics. Yes, sir. The question is, what do we do about it? Hassan was quiet for a long moment, his eyes distant. Sarah had known him for 20 years, had watched him navigate the complexities of post-contact politics, the challenges of integrating Earth into galactic society. He had always been a careful man, a diplomat's diplomat who believed in the power of negotiation and compromise. Mr. Secretary, she prompted. I'm thinking about something my grandfather told me once, Hassan said slowly. He was a soldier, fought in the resource wars back in the 21st century. He said the worst mistake you could make was to assume your enemy shared your values. That just because you preferred peace didn't mean they respected peace. Sir? Hassan's eyes focused on her, and Sarah saw something there she had never seen before. Not anger, exactly, but something colder. More dangerous. I want you to send a message to the Primarch, he said. Tell him that humanity will give its answer in exactly 72 hours. What answer should I prepare him for? Don't prepare him for anything, Hassan replied. Just tell him we'll respond at the deadline. And, Sarah? Yes, sir? I want you to request immediate transport back to Earth. Full diplomatic immunity, priority passage. We're going to need you here for what comes next. The connection ended, leaving Sarah staring at the empty holographic display. In the reflection, she could see Rodriguez behind her, his face pale. Ma'am, he asked. What do you think he meant by what comes next? Sarah stood slowly, her mind racing through possibilities. Hassan hadn't given her any orders to prepare for surrender negotiations. He hadn't asked her to draft contingency plans for evacuation. Instead, he had recalled her home and promised the council an answer that he refused to describe. I think, she said quietly, we're about to find out why humanity spent so long learning how to make war before we ever learned how to make peace. 3 hours later, Sarah stood in the observation deck of the fastest human ship available, watching the council station shrink into the distance. Captain Torres, a veteran of the Colonial Patrol Service, stood beside her with his hands clasped behind his back. Ambassador, he said, I've been ordered to maintain communications silence except for emergency protocols. No one's to know our departure schedule or destination. Understood, Captain. There's something else, Torres continued, his voice dropping. Before we left, I received a priority message from Fleet Command. All human military vessels are being recalled to Sol System. All of them. Every ship, every station, every patrol craft. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. That would leave the colonies completely undefended. Yes, ma'am. It would. Torres paused, studying her reflection in the observation window. Ambassador, in your opinion, is the Secretary-General planning to surrender? Sarah thought about Hassan's expression, about the cold calculation in his eyes, about his grandfather's words regarding enemies and values. She thought about 3 centuries of human history, about a species that had clawed its way up from tribal warfare to interstellar civilization, that had learned to split atoms before they learned to split the difference in negotiations. No, Captain, she said finally. I don't think he's planning to surrender at all. Behind them, the stars wheeled in their ancient patterns, indifferent to the small dramas of biological intelligence. But, somewhere among those stars, in meeting rooms and command centers across human space, the descendants of Earth were about to remember something their ancestors had known all too well. Sometimes peace is not the absence of war. Sometimes peace is what you get when you win the war so decisively that no one wants to fight you again. The 72-hour countdown had begun. Admiral Elena Vasquez stood in the center of the Strategic Operations Command, watching as holographic displays showed the movement of every human vessel in known space. The command center, buried 3 kilometers beneath the Swiss Alps, hummed with activity as hundreds of analysts, tacticians, and communications specialists worked at stations arranged in concentric circles around the central platform. Ma'am, the last of the Colonial Patrol ships just entered the Sol System, reported Commander Park, her chief of staff. Total fleet strength now shows 237 vessels of various classifications. Elena nodded absently, her attention focused on the larger strategic picture. For the past 18 hours, since Secretary-General Hassan had issued the recall order, human ships had been streaming toward Earth from across their small corner of the galaxy. To any outside observer, it would look like a civilization in retreat, gathering its scattered forces for a final, desperate stand. They would be wrong. What's the status on the industrial platforms, she asked. Luna Base reports full production capacity. The asteroid mining stations have tripled their output as of 6 hours ago. Mars Orbital is operating at 120% of rated capacity. Commander Park paused, consulting his tablet. Admiral, these production numbers, they're not sustainable long-term. We're burning through resources at an incredible rate. We don't need long-term, Elena replied. We need 72 hours minus 18. 54 hours to be exact. The massive doors of the command center opened, and Secretary General Hassan entered flanked by two individuals Elena hadn't expected to see. Dr. Richard Chen, the Director of Human Colonial Sciences, and General Marcus Webb, officially retired but unofficially the most dangerous human being alive. Webb had spent 40 years in the colonial marines before disappearing into classified research projects that most people assumed were theoretical. Elena saluted as Hassan approached the central platform. Mr. Secretary General. Status report is ready for your review. Skip the formalities, Elena. We don't have time. Hassan gestured to the holographic displays surrounding them. What I need to know is simple, can we do this? Elena felt a cold smile tug at her lips. Sir, the question isn't whether we can do this. The question is how thoroughly you want it done. Hassan's expression was grim. I want it done completely. I want it done so there's no misunderstanding about humanity's position in galactic politics. And I want it done in a way that makes every species in the galaxy think twice before they mistake our diplomacy for weakness again. Dr. Chen stepped forward, his hands shaking slightly as he activated a personal data pad. Mr. Secretary General, I have to voice my objections again. What we're discussing goes against 3 centuries of human diplomatic philosophy. It violates our treaties with the galactic hegemony. Most importantly, it makes us no better than the species we claim to oppose. Richard, Hassan said quietly, how many humans have died in the Outer Rim raids over the past 6 months? Approximately 12,000 confirmed casualties, with an estimated 30,000 missing and presumed captured. And how many diplomatic protests have we filed? Dr. Chen's shoulders sagged. 147. How many responses have we received? 3. All stating that the matter was under investigation. Hassan turned to address the room, his voice carrying clearly to every corner of the command center. Ladies and gentlemen, for 300 years, humanity has tried to find its place in galactic civilization through peaceful means. We've offered friendship, trade, cultural exchange, and technological cooperation. We've followed every protocol, respected every treaty, and honored every agreement. He paused, looking around at the faces watching him. In return, we've been treated as a minor irritation by species who measured their existence in geological epochs. Our citizens have been murdered, our ships destroyed, our colonies raided, and, when we ask for justice, we're told to surrender our sovereignty or face extinction. The room was silent except for the quiet hum of electronics and the distant rumble of machinery. Elena could see the weight of history settling on Hassan's shoulders, the burden of a decision that would change humanity's place in the galaxy forever. General Webb, Hassan continued, please brief the assembled staff on Project Prometheus. Webb stepped forward, and Elena felt a chill run down her spine. She had known Marcus Webb by reputation for decades, but seeing him in person was different. He moved with the fluid grace of a predator, his pale gray eyes taking in every detail of the room with the systematic efficiency of someone who had spent a lifetime identifying threats and eliminating them. Project Prometheus began 47 years ago, Webb said, his voice carrying the flat tone of someone discussing the weather. It was initiated after the first contact with the galactic hegemony, when our xenobiologists and strategic analysts realized that humanity was entering a galaxy where might made right, but our diplomatic corps was determined to prove otherwise. He gestured, and the holographic displays shifted to show technical schematics, production facilities, and weapon specifications that Elena had never seen before. The project had 2 primary objectives, Webb continued. First, to develop military technologies that could give humanity a decisive advantage over any potential galactic threat. Second, to keep those technologies completely secret from both our own population and our galactic neighbors. Dr. Chen made a noise of protest. Marcus, you're talking about weapons of mass destruction. Humanity agreed to ban such research after the nuclear accords of 2089. The nuclear accords banned weapons of mass destruction on Earth or against human targets, Webb corrected. They said nothing about weapons designed to be used against hostile alien species in defense of human civilians. Elena stared at the schematics floating in the air around them. What she was seeing wasn't just advanced technology, it was technology so far beyond current human capabilities that it seemed almost impossible. Vessels that could engage entire fleets single-handedly. Weapons that could crack planets. Defensive systems that could protect entire solar systems from invasion. How, she asked. How did you develop technology this advanced without anyone knowing? Webb's expression didn't change. By recruiting the most brilliant human minds of the past 4 decades and making them disappear from official records. By establishing research facilities in dead systems far from any trade routes. By creating a completely parallel industrial base that exists entirely outside normal human civilization. Hassan stepped forward again. Admiral Vasquez, Dr. Chen, what you're seeing represents the largest classified project in human history. For 47 years, we've been preparing for this moment. Not hoping for it, not planning around it, but preparing for the day when humanity would have to choose between surrender and war. Elena felt pieces clicking into place in her mind. The ship recalls. You're not gathering our existing fleet for defense. You're clearing space for deployment of the Prometheus assets. Correct, Webb confirmed. Our conventional fleet will take defensive positions around Earth and the inner colonies. The Prometheus fleet will handle the Zektai Empire. Handle them how? Dr. Chen asked, though his voice suggested he already knew the answer. Hassan's expression was carved from stone. Completely. The next 6 hours passed in a blur of activity that Elena would remember for the rest of her life. Deep space monitoring stations began detecting massive energy signatures from regions of space that were supposed to be empty. Ships appeared on long-range sensors, vessels that didn't match any known human design but transmitted proper identification codes. Supply convoys emerged from hyperspace carrying resources and equipment that shouldn't have existed. Elena stood in her private office, reviewing fleet deployment orders that read like something out of a strategic fantasy. The Prometheus fleet consisted of 112 vessels, each one capable of matching any 10 ships in the conventional human fleet. More importantly, they carried weapons and defensive systems based on technologies that the galactic hegemony didn't know existed. Admiral? Commander Park's voice came through her comlink. We're receiving a transmission from the Council Station. Ambassador Chen is requesting immediate conference with the Secretary General. Patch her through to the secure conference room. I'll notify the Secretary General. Elena made her way through the corridors of the command complex, passing windows that showed the busy activity of Luna Base in the distance. Massive shipyards were visible on the lunar surface, their construction base filled with vessels that looked like nothing in the human fleet registry. The sight should have been reassuring, but Elena found herself troubled by a deeper question. In the secure conference room, Hassan was already seated at the holographic communicator when Elena arrived. Ambassador Chen's image materialized in the center of the room, her face drawn with exhaustion and worry. Mr. Secretary General, she began without preamble, I need to know what humanity's response is going to be. The Zektai fleet is already moving toward the Outer Rim colonies. Intelligence sources suggest they're planning to begin their annexation regardless of our answer. Hassan's expression was calm. Our answer is very simple, Sarah. We decline their generous offer. Sir, with respect, you don't understand the scale of what we're facing. The Zektai Empire has mobilized over 3,000 vessels. Our entire fleet couldn't stand against a tenth of that number. I understand perfectly, Hassan replied. Please return to the Council Station and inform the Primarch that humanity's answer is no. We will not surrender our sovereignty. We will not submit to conquest. And we will not accept annexation by the Zektai Empire or any other galactic power. Ambassador Chen's image flickered as she leaned forward. And then, what? They'll destroy our colonies, enslave our population, and divide our territory among themselves. The Council has made it clear they won't intervene. Then, the Council will learn that intervention works both ways. Elena saw something in Hassan's expression that made her stomach tighten. This wasn't just determination, this was the look of a man who had already decided that the old rules no longer applied. Sir, Ambassador Chen continued, I've been humanity's representative for 15 years. I've worked to build relationships, to find common ground, to prove that we deserve a place in galactic civilization. If we reject this ultimatum, we're throwing away 3 centuries of diplomatic progress." Hassan was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried a finality that Elena had never heard before. "Sarah, there's something I need you to understand. Diplomacy only works between equals. For 3 centuries, we've been trying to negotiate with species that see us as children playing at being adults. That ends now. What does that mean? It means that in 36 hours, the galaxy is going to learn that humanity has grown up. Please deliver our message to the Council and, then, request immediate transport to Earth. I want all human diplomatic personnel clear of Council space within 24 hours. Ambassador Chan's image studied Hassan for a long moment. "Sir, what aren't you telling me?" Hassan's smile was cold. "I'm not telling you that humanity has been preparing for this day since we first met the galactic hegemony. I'm not telling you that our apparent weakness has been a carefully maintained illusion. And I'm not telling you that the species who think they can conquer us are about to discover that they've made the last mistake of their civilization." The transmission ended, leaving Elena alone with Hassan in the secure conference room. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. "Elena," Hassan said finally, "I want you to understand something. What we're about to do will change humanity forever. After this, we'll never again be seen as the galaxy's harmless neighbors. There will be consequences." Elena thought about the Outer Rim colonies, about the human civilians who had died while their government filed diplomatic protests. She thought about Ambassador Chan's 15 years of patient negotiation, about the small gains and painful compromises that had marked humanity's integration into galactic society. "Mr. Secretary General," she said, "what's the point of being seen as harmless if it means watching our people die while we ask nicely for justice?" Hassan nodded slowly. "That's what I hoped you'd say. Admiral, I'm placing you in operational command of the Prometheus fleet. Your mission is simple: eliminate the Zektai threat permanently." Elena felt the weight of command settling on her shoulders, heavier than anything she had ever carried before. "Define eliminate, sir." Hassan's expression was carved from granite. "I want their military destroyed. I want their government broken. I want their empire reduced to scattered refugees who spend the rest of their lives warning other species what happens when you threaten humanity." Elena stood and saluted. "Understood, sir. When do we deploy?" Hassan checked his chronometer. "The Zektai fleet will reach the Outer Rim in 18 hours. You'll intercept them 12 hours before that." He paused, studying her face. "Elena, there's one more thing. Make sure the engagement is recorded. Full documentation, every angle, complete tactical logs." "For historical records?" "For broadcast," Hassan replied. "I want every species in the galaxy to watch what happens to the Zektai. I want them to see exactly what they're dealing with when they mistake human diplomacy for human weakness." Elena felt a chill run down her spine as the full scope of Hassan's plan became clear. This wasn't just about defeating the Zektai Empire. This was about sending a message to the entire galaxy, about redefining humanity's place in the cosmic order through overwhelming demonstration of power. "Yes, sir," she said quietly. As Elena left the conference room, she could feel the weight of history pressing down on her shoulders. In less than 18 hours, humanity would either secure its place among the galactic powers or destroy itself in the attempt. But, looking at the deployment orders in her hands, at the specifications for weapons that shouldn't exist and ships that defied known physics, she was beginning to think the real question wasn't whether humanity could win. The question was whether anything would be left of the Zektai Empire when humanity was finished demonstrating the difference between choosing peace and being capable of war. Admiral Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge of the HFS Retribution, staring at the tactical display that showed the approaching Zektai fleet. 3,000 vessels, ranging from massive dreadnoughts that could level continents to swarms of fighter craft that moved like mechanical locusts through space. It was the largest military force ever assembled in this region of the galaxy, commanded by War Prince Kethvar himself, the architect of 17 successful conquests. "Admiral," reported Captain Morrison, "the Retribution's commanding officer, long-range sensors are tracking the Zektai formation." They're maintaining standard Imperial battle doctrine, heavy ships in the center, screens of cruisers and destroyers on the flanks, fighter squadrons in reserve. Elena nodded, her attention split between the tactical display and the communication feeds from the rest of the Prometheus fleet. 112 vessels hung in space around her, ships that looked nothing like traditional human designs. Where human ships had always been built for efficiency and functionality, the Prometheus vessels were works of art, flowing lines that seemed to bend light around them, hulls that shifted color depending on the viewing angle, weapon arrays that hummed with barely contained energy. Status report from all fleet elements, she ordered. Prometheus 1 through Prometheus 28 report ready for engagement, came the response from Lieutenant Commander Torres at the communications station. All weapon systems green, defensive screens at maximum efficiency. The fleet is ready for Operation Thunderbolt. Elena activated the fleet-wide communication channel. All ships, this is Admiral Vasquez. In approximately 6 minutes, we will engage the largest enemy fleet in recorded human history. What we do here today will determine whether humanity remains free or becomes a footnote in galactic history. She paused, looking at the faces of her bridge crew. Most of them had served in the conventional fleet, but they had all volunteered for the Prometheus project knowing that it would likely be a one-way assignment. They were patriots in the truest sense, willing to die so that their children could live free. I want you all to remember something, Elena continued. For 3 centuries, humanity has been the galaxy's favorite underdog. We've been patted on the head and told to sit quietly while our betters decided our fate. Today, we remind the galaxy that being peaceful and being helpless are not the same thing. The response came from every ship in the fleet simultaneously. Understood, Admiral. Elena closed the fleet channel and opened a secure link to Earth. Hassan's face appeared on her personal display, his expression grim but determined. Admiral, are you ready to proceed? Yes, sir. The Zektai fleet will be in weapons range in 4 minutes. Hassan nodded. Elena, I need you to understand something. What happens in the next hour will be studied by military historians for the next 1,000 years. Every decision you make, every order you give, will be analyzed and debated by future generations. I understand, sir. Good. One more thing, we're broadcasting this engagement on every communication frequency in the galaxy. The Galactic Council, every member species, every independent system, they're all going to watch this in real time. Elena felt her stomach tighten. Sir, that's a significant risk. If we lose, it won't matter who was watching, Hassan interrupted. But if we win, I want every species in the galaxy to know exactly what happened here. No rumors, no propaganda, no diplomatic spin. I want them to see the raw footage of what happens when you threaten humanity. The connection ended, leaving Elena alone with the weight of command and the approaching enemy fleet. She checked her chronometer, 3 minutes until engagement range. Captain Morrison, she said, signal the fleet to assume attack formation Omega. The tactical display shifted as the Prometheus fleet moved with precision that defied physics. Ships that should have taken minutes to change course or orientation moved like dancers, flowing into new positions with grace that seemed almost organic. It was another gift of the Prometheus technology, propulsion systems that manipulated spacetime itself, allowing for maneuverability that traditional ships couldn't match. Admiral, reported the tactical officer, we're receiving a transmission from the Zektai fleet. It's on standard diplomatic frequencies. Put it through. The main display flickered, and Elena found herself looking at War Prince Kethvar, the most feared military commander in Zektai space. His reptilian features were marked with the ritual scars of 17 victories, and his forearms moved in complex gestures as he spoke. Human vessel, I am War Prince Kethvar of the Zektai Empire. You will withdraw your ships immediately and allow my forces to proceed to their objective. Any interference will be met with total destruction. Elena stepped forward, making sure her image would be transmitted clearly. War Prince Kethvar, I am Admiral Elena Vasquez of the human Prometheus fleet. Your objective includes the conquest of human colonies and the enslavement of human civilians. That makes it my problem. Kethvar's head tilted in what Elena recognized as a gesture of amusement among his species. Human Admiral, your fleet consists of barely 100 vessels. My force number's 3,000. Do you suffer from some form of mental deficiency, or do you simply not comprehend mathematics?
I comprehend mathematics perfectly, Elena replied. I also comprehend something you clearly don't, the difference between quantity and quality.
The War Prince's amusement seemed to increase. Are you seriously suggesting that your primitive human vessels can stand against the might of the Zektai Empire?
Elena smiled, and something in that expression made Kethvar's own expression falter slightly. War Prince, humanity has been underestimated by bigger, older, and supposedly smarter species than yours.
It never ends well for them.
She cut the transmission and turned to her tactical officer. All ships, prepare to engage. Target priority is enemy command vessels, then heavy cruisers, then screening elements.
Admiral, Captain Morrison said quietly, the Zektai fleet is beginning to deploy. They're assuming standard battle formation.
Elena watched as 3,000 enemy ships arranged themselves in the classic Imperial battle doctrine that had conquered 17 civilizations. Heavy dreadnoughts in the center, their massive forms bristling with weapons capable of cracking moons. Cruiser screens extending in a wide arc, designed to envelope and destroy any opposing force.
Fighter squadrons launching in waves, preparing to swarm the human fleet like angry insects. Ma'am, the communications officer reported, we're receiving transmissions from across the galaxy. The broadcast is active on all channels. Everyone is watching. Elena took a deep breath. Somewhere in the depths of space, the Galactic Council was watching. Ambassador Chen was watching. Billions of humans across the colonies were watching. And, somewhere in that vast audience, other species were taking notes, preparing to learn from whatever happened next. All ships, Elena announced, commence engagement.
What happened next would be remembered as the moment humanity announced its arrival as a galactic power.
The Prometheus fleet didn't charge forward like traditional ships. Instead, they seemed to simply appear among the Zektai formation, reality bending around them as they translated through spacetime.
Elena watched the tactical display as her vessels materialized inside the enemy fleet's defensive perimeter, their weapons already charged and targeting systems locked.
The first salvo from the Prometheus fleet defied everything the Zektai knew about space combat.
Instead of conventional energy weapons or kinetic projectiles, the human ships unleashed focused distortions in spacetime itself.
Enemy vessels simply ceased.
Not destroyed, not vaporized, but erased from reality as the fundamental forces that held their matter together were temporarily suspended.
My God, whispered Captain Morrison. Admiral, their entire first line just vanished.
Elena watched as 1,000 Zektai ships disappeared in the space of 30 seconds. The survivors were already breaking formation, their commanders screaming orders in a dozen different languages as they tried to comprehend what they were facing. War Prince Kethvar's voice cut across the communication channels, his earlier arrogance replaced by something close to panic.
What are you? What weapons are these? Elena opened a response channel.
These are the weapons of a species that's been preparing for this conversation for 47 years, War Prince.
We tried diplomacy. You chose war.
The Zektai fleet was attempting to regroup, their heavy ships turning to bring their main guns to bear on the human vessels.
It was a futile gesture.
The Prometheus ships moved through space like ghosts, phase-shifting through solid matter, appearing and disappearing at will. When they fired, entire squadrons of enemy ships simply stopped existing.
Admiral, the tactical officer reported, the Zektai are attempting to retreat. Approximately 800 vessels are trying to break away from the engagement zone. Elena's expression hardened. Negative.
No survivors, no escapees, no witnesses except what we choose to broadcast.
This message needs to be absolutely clear. She opened the fleet channel.
All ships, implement containment protocol.
Nothing leaves this system.
The Prometheus fleet spread out in a perfect sphere around the Zektai formation, their advanced engines allowing them to maintain positions that should have been impossible. As enemy ships attempted to flee, they found their escape routes blocked by human vessels that seemed to exist in multiple locations simultaneously. The slaughter that followed lasted exactly 17 minutes. When it was over, 3,000 Zektai ships had been reduced to expanding clouds of superheated plasma.
Not a single enemy vessel survived.
not a single escape pod was launched. The most powerful military force in this region of the galaxy had been erased from existence by a human fleet that hadn't lost a single ship or suffered any casualties. Elena stood in the sudden silence of her bridge, watching the tactical display show empty space where moments before a massive fleet had existed. The scope of what they had just accomplished was almost impossible to process. The Zektai Empire, a power that had conquered 17 civilizations, had just lost its entire expeditionary force without managing to damage a single human ship. "Admiral," Captain Morrison said quietly, "we're receiving communication requests from across the galaxy. The Galactic Council, the Hegemony Military Command, Independent Systems, even the Zektai Home Fleet.
Everyone wants to know what just happened."
Elena activated the galaxy-wide broadcast channel, the same one that had carried the live footage of the engagement to billions of viewers across known space. "This is Admiral Elena Vasquez of the human Prometheus fleet," she announced, her voice carrying to every inhabited system within 1,000 light-years.
37 minutes ago, the Zektai Empire sent 3,000 ships to conquer human colonies and enslave human civilians. That fleet no longer exists. She paused, letting the words sink in across the galaxy. For 3 centuries, humanity has sought peace through diplomacy, trade, and mutual cooperation. We have honored every treaty, respected every law, and sought justice through proper channels. In return, we have been treated as inferiors by species who mistake our preference for peace as evidence of weakness." The bridge was silent around her, every member of her crew understanding that they were witnessing a pivotal moment in galactic history. That mistake ends today. Humanity is not weak. We are not defenseless.
And we are not interested in being anyone's subjects, tributaries, or conquered territory.
We tried to solve our differences peacefully. You chose war instead.
Elena's expression hardened as she delivered the final part of her message. To any species currently planning aggressive action against human interests, consider this your only warning.
We have been peaceful because we chose to be peaceful, not because we had no alternative. That choice is no longer available to us.
She closed the broadcast and turned to Captain Morrison.
"Signal the fleet to return to Earth. And send a message to Secretary General Hassan, mission accomplished." As the Prometheus fleet prepared to depart, long-range sensors began detecting something unprecedented. Across the galaxy, military fleets were standing down. Planned invasions were being cancelled. Species that had been preparing for war were suddenly very interested in diplomatic solutions. The message had been received. Humanity had just announced that it was no longer the galaxy's harmless neighbor. And every species in known space was frantically trying to figure out what that meant for their own survival. But Elena knew that the real consequences were just beginning. Destroying the Zektai fleet had been the easy part. What came next, dealing with a galaxy that now saw humanity as either a potential ally or an existential threat, would test everything they had learned about war and peace over the past 3 centuries. The storm had been unleashed. Now they would have to live with the hurricane that followed. The Galactic Council chamber had never been so quiet. Ambassador Sarah Chen stood at the human delegation podium, looking out at 300 alien representatives who stared at her with expressions ranging from fear to barely concealed hostility. The magnificent crystal spires that had once seemed to dwarf humanity's modest pillar now felt somehow smaller, less impressive in the wake of what the galaxy had witnessed 3 days ago. Primarch Vexhi's 6 arms trembled slightly as he activated the speaking platform. His serpentine body, which had once coiled with arrogant confidence, now seemed to huddle in on itself. When he spoke, his voice carried none of its previous condescension. "Ambassador Chen," he began, "the Council requests clarification regarding the recent incident in the Outer Rim territories." Sarah maintained her composure, though inside she felt the weight of galactic history pressing down on her. The footage from Admiral Vasquez's engagement had been broadcast on every communication frequency in known space. Billions of beings had watched 3,000 Zektai ships simply cease to exist, erased from reality by weapons that defied everything the galaxy thought it knew about physics and warfare. "What clarification do you require, Primarch?" she asked. Councillor Thektar, his crystalline form refracting light in nervous patterns, spoke without rising. "The human fleet, the weapons they employed, they appear to violate several fundamental laws of physics." "Actually," Sarah replied calmly, they don't violate any laws of physics. They simply utilize aspects of physics that your species haven't discovered yet. A ripple of unease moved through the chamber. Admiral Karath, the massive predatory warrior who had once mocked humanity's peaceful nature, remained conspicuously silent in his seat. Ambassador, Counselor Zethmora's musical voice carried a nervous tremor. Your government's response to the Zektai situation was disproportionate. The complete annihilation of their expeditionary force was exactly proportionate to their stated intention to conquer our colonies and enslave our civilians, Sarah interrupted. The Zektai Empire declared war on humanity. We responded accordingly. Primarch Vexhi's tongue flicked out nervously. But surely there could have been a diplomatic solution. Negotiations, compromise, some middle ground between surrender and that. Sarah felt a cold smile tug at her lips. Primarch, 72 hours ago, I stood in this very chamber and requested the Council's assistance in addressing raids against human civilians. I was told that humanity should accept protection from the very species conducting those raids. Where was your interest in diplomatic solutions then? The chamber fell silent. Sarah could see alien representatives shifting uncomfortably in their seats, the weight of their own complicity settling heavily on their shoulders. The matter we must address now, Sarah continued, is not the past, but the future. Humanity has demonstrated that we are capable of defending ourselves. The question is, what kind of galactic neighbor do you want us to be? A new voice cut through the tension. War Commander Zelthak of the Hegemony's military forces rose from his seat, his four-armed form moving with the careful precision of a career soldier. Ambassador Chen, the weapon systems demonstrated by your fleet represent a fundamental shift in galactic power balance. Such technology in the hands of an aggressive species could threaten every civilization in known space. Sarah's expression hardened. War Commander, are you suggesting that humanity is an aggressive species? I'm suggesting that any species capable of completely annihilating a fleet of 3,000 ships without suffering a single casualty represents a potential existential threat to galactic stability. Sarah activated her personal data pad, and holographic displays materialized around the chamber showing star charts, trade routes, and colonization patterns. War Commander, in the 3 centuries since first contact, how many wars has humanity initiated? Zelthak hesitated. Well, technically. The answer is 0, Sarah continued. How many species have we conquered? None, but how many civilizations have we enslaved? None. How many planets have we strip-mined for resources? Zelthak's forearms gestured in frustration. None, but that doesn't mean what it means, Sarah interrupted, is that you're worried about the wrong species? For 3 centuries, humanity has been the most peaceful, cooperative member of galactic society. We've shared our technology, opened our trade routes, provided humanitarian aid, and sought resolution to conflicts through diplomatic means. She gestured to the holographic displays. Meanwhile, in that same period, the Zektai Empire conquered 17 civilizations. The hegemony itself has absorbed 43 independent systems through voluntary annexation. The Nitherian Republic has strip-mined 11 worlds to extinction for rare minerals. The chamber erupted in angry voices as various species attempted to defend their actions, but Sarah's voice cut through the noise. The only thing that's changed is that humanity is no longer defenseless against predatory species who mistake diplomacy for weakness. We remain committed to peace, but we will no longer tolerate aggression against our people. Primarch Vexhi raised 2 of his arms for silence. Ambassador, the Council acknowledges humanity's grievances. Perhaps we can discuss some form of reparations for past incidents, some accommodation for future. Primarch, Sarah said quietly, you're not hearing me. We're not here to negotiate for scraps from the galactic table. We're here to establish humanity's position as an equal partner in galactic civilization. What does that mean exactly? Asked Counselor Thektar. Sarah's smile was sharp as broken glass. It means that from this point forward, humanity will be treated with the same respect accorded to any major galactic power. It means that when human civilians are murdered, there will be consequences. It means that when human colonies are threatened, the galaxy will take notice. And it means that when humanity speaks, the Council will listen. War Commander Zelthak leaned forward. And if the Council refuses to grant such recognition?
Sarah's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes made several alien representatives shift uncomfortably. War Commander, 3 days ago the Zektai Empire controlled over 800 star systems. Today, their home fleet is in full retreat, their government has collapsed, and their remaining colonies are declaring independence. All of this happened because they made the mistake of thinking humanity was too weak to defend itself. She paused, letting the implications sink in. The Council is welcome to make the same mistake. The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah could hear her own heartbeat, could feel the weight of 300 pairs of alien eyes studying her with new understanding. The harmless human ambassador who had spent 15 years politely requesting justice had been replaced by someone far more dangerous. Admiral Karath finally spoke, his voice carrying the weight of someone who had spent a lifetime studying warfare. Ambassador, what you're describing sounds very much like an ultimatum. Sarah turned to face the massive warrior, remembering his dismissive arrogance from just a few days ago. Admiral, what I'm describing is reality. For 3 centuries, humanity has been asking nicely for our place at the galactic table. We've been patient, diplomatic, and understanding. That patience has limits. And if those limits are reached? Sarah's smile was winter cold. Ask the Zektai. The chamber erupted in chaos as delegates argued, shouted, and gestured frantically at each other. Some species called for immediate military action against humanity. Others demanded emergency sessions to address the new galactic reality. A few simply sat in stunned silence, trying to process the magnitude of what had just occurred. Through it all, Sarah stood calmly at the human podium, watching 3 centuries of diplomatic assumptions crumble into dust. Primarch Vexhai finally managed to restore order, his 6 arms working frantically to silence the various factions. When quiet returned, his voice was carefully controlled. Ambassador Chin, the Council needs time to digest these developments. Perhaps we could recess for 48 hours while each delegation consults with their governments? Sarah nodded. Of course, Primarch. But, while the Council deliberates, I should mention that humanity has some immediate concerns that require attention. What concerns? Sarah activated her data pad again, and new displays materialized showing shipping lanes, mining operations, and colonial territories. First, the Outer Rim piracy problem needs to be resolved. Our analysis indicates that several Council member species have been providing support to raider groups, either directly or indirectly. She highlighted specific trade routes and supply stations. Second, we've identified 17 instances of unlawful territorial claims against human colonies. These need to be withdrawn immediately. More data appeared. Third, we've documented systematic discrimination against human traders and merchants in 43 systems. This needs to end. Councillor Zethmora's voice carried a note of panic. Ambassador, these demands would require massive changes to existing trade agreements, territorial treaties, and economic relationships. Sarah's expression was serene. Yes, they would. Of course, if the Council prefers, we could address these issues through the same methods we used to resolve the Zektai situation. The threat hung in the air like a blade. Sarah could see the mental calculations occurring behind alien eyes as delegates tried to determine whether humanity was bluffing, and if they were willing to gamble their civilizations on that possibility. War Commander Zelfak spoke carefully. Ambassador, surely you understand that the other major powers will not simply accept this new arrangement. The hegemony, the Nitherian Republic, the corporate syndicate, they have their own interests to protect. I'm sure they do, Sarah agreed. But, they also have their own survival to consider. The Zektai thought they were dealing with weak, defenseless humans. They were wrong. I hope others won't make the same mistake. She began gathering her materials, preparing to leave the chamber. Pre-March, humanity looks forward to the Council's decision. But, I should mention that our patience, while considerable, is not infinite. As Sarah walked toward the exit, Pre-March Vexhai called after her. Ambassador, how long are you prepared to wait for a response? Sarah paused at the chamber doors and looked back at the assembly.
300 alien representatives stared at her, their faces showing everything from fear to calculation to barely controlled rage.
These were the powers that had shaped galactic civilization for millennia, the ancient species that had looked down on humanity as upstart children playing at interstellar politics.
Now they were afraid.
Pre-March, she said, humanity has waited 3 centuries for justice.
We've learned patience.
But, we've also learned that sometimes the only way to get respect is to make the alternative unthinkable. She smiled one last time, the expression carrying all the warmth of interstellar space. I'd suggest you not test our resolve further. As the chamber doors closed behind her, Sarah could hear the eruption of voices that followed. Arguments, accusations, emergency motions, and desperate attempts to understand what humanity's demonstration of power meant for the future of galactic civilization. She walked through the corridors of the council station with steady steps, past windows that showed the swirling nebulae of the galactic core. Somewhere among those distant stars, Admiral Vasquez and the Prometheus fleet were returning to Earth, their mission complete. Somewhere else, the scattered remnants of the Zektai Empire were learning what defeat truly meant. And, everywhere, across hundreds of worlds and thousands of systems, species that had never given humanity a second thought were suddenly very concerned about their own survival. The galaxy had changed forever in the space of 17 minutes. Now came the hard part, figuring out how to live with the consequences of that change. 6 months after the Battle of the Outer Rim, Secretary General Hassan stood in the observation deck of the newly constructed diplomatic complex orbiting Earth, watching as alien vessels approached in carefully organized formations. The ships came bearing the flags and insignia of species that had once dismissed humanity as galactic children, now arriving as supplicants seeking audience with the new power that had emerged from what they had thought was empty space. "Sir," Admiral Vasquez reported, approaching Hassan with a data pad in her hands, "we have confirmation that the last of the Zektai holdout colonies has surrendered to the human colonial authority. The Zektai Empire has officially ceased to exist." Hassan nodded without taking his eyes off the approaching vessels.
"Casualties? Minimal on our side.
The Zektai military was already broken after we demonstrated what happened to species that threaten human civilians. Most of their remaining forces surrendered without engagement."
"And their population? Relocated to designated worlds within their former territory, under human protection. They're being treated as refugees, not prisoners.
Full rights and protections under the colonial authority's civilian codes."
Hassan smiled slightly.
It was important that the galaxy understand the difference between humanity's capacity for war and its inclination toward mercy.
The complete destruction of the Zektai fleet had been a necessity, a demonstration that there were consequences for threatening human lives.
But, the treatment of Zektai civilians would demonstrate that humanity remained committed to its principles, even in victory.
"What's the status of our diplomatic initiatives?" Admiral Vasquez consulted her datapad.
47 species have formally requested trade agreements with humanity in the past month.
19 have offered military assistance pacts. And 32 have submitted what can only be described as tribute offerings. Tribute offerings?
Technology, resources, territorial concessions. The Nitherian Republic offered us 3 entire star systems as a gesture of galactic friendship.
The corporate syndicate wants to provide free transport services for all human cargo in perpetuity.
Hassan finally turned from the window, his expression thoughtful.
"They're afraid." Terrified, Vasquez confirmed. Intelligence reports suggest that most major powers have completely restructured their military doctrines.
Everyone's trying to figure out how to defend against weapons that can erase matter from existence.
Can they? Vasquez's smile was sharp. Not with current galactic technology.
The Prometheus systems operate on principles that most species won't discover for another few centuries.
Even if they knew the theoretical framework, they lack the industrial base to manufacture the components.
Hassan walked to the conference table in the center of the observation deck, where holographic displays showed the current state of galactic civilization. The map told a story of fundamental change. Trade routes were being rerouted to include human space, military alliances were being restructured to account for humanity's new capabilities, and political boundaries were shifting as species reconsidered their positions in light of the new reality.
"There's something else," Vasquez continued. Ambassador Chen has requested priority communication from the Council station. She says the galactic hegemony is ready to make a formal offer. Hassan activated the holographic communicator, and Ambassador Chen's image materialized in the room. Her expression carried the subtle satisfaction of someone who had watched 3 centuries of patient diplomacy finally bear fruit. Mr. Secretary General, she began without preamble, the Hegemony Council has unanimously voted to offer humanity permanent membership in the Inner Circle. Hassan raised an eyebrow. The Inner Circle? The 5 species who effectively control galactic civilization, the Hegemony, the Nitherian Republic, the Corporate Syndicate, the Etherian Commonwealth, and the Crystalline Collective. They're offering to make it 6. What would that entail? Ambassador Chen's smile was triumphant. Permanent seats on all major councils. Veto power over galactic legislation. Priority access to all trade routes and resources. Essentially, they're offering humanity co-equal status with the oldest and most powerful civilizations in the galaxy. Hassan was quiet for a long moment, studying the data streams that showed humanity's current position. 6 months ago, they had been junior members of galactic society, tolerated but not respected. Now they were being offered equal partnership with species that had shaped civilization for millennia. What's the catch? He asked. No catch, sir. Well, not exactly. They want assurances that humanity will use its new capabilities responsibly. They're afraid that if we become destabilizing to galactic civilization, other species might follow our example and start developing weapons of mass destruction. Hassan understood. The galaxy's power structure had been stable for thousands of years precisely because the major powers had maintained a careful balance of mutual assured destruction. Humanity's technological breakthrough had shattered that balance, and now everyone was scrambling to establish a new equilibrium. They also want something else, Chen continued. They want to know how we developed the Prometheus technology. Not for military purposes, they know we won't share weapon specifications, but for defensive applications. They're afraid that other species might develop similar capabilities independently. Hassan glanced at Admiral Vasquez, who gave a subtle shake of her head. The secrets of Project Prometheus would remain classified for the foreseeable future. Humanity's technological advantage was too valuable to share, and too dangerous to allow other species to develop on their own. Tell the Council that humanity appreciates their offer, Hassan said finally. We'll accept membership in the Inner Circle, with one modification. What modification? We want formal recognition of human territorial sovereignty over all worlds and systems currently under our control, plus an additional buffer zone of 50 light-years around our core worlds. Any species that enters that zone without permission will be considered hostile. Chen nodded. They expected something like that. Pre-March Vex High has already indicated that the territorial demands are acceptable. Hassan felt a moment of satisfaction. The territory he had just claimed included several resource-rich systems that had previously been disputed between various minor powers. Now they would be under human control, providing the industrial base needed to support humanity's expanding role in galactic civilization. There's one more thing, Chen added. War Commander Zelthak has submitted his resignation from the Hegemony military. He wants to serve as a military advisor to the Human Colonial Authority. Hassan raised both eyebrows. The same war commander who questioned our aggressive tendencies 6 months ago? The same one. Apparently, he's decided that if the galaxy is going to change, he wants to be on the winning side. His exact words were, "I've spent my life studying warfare, and I've never seen anything like what humanity accomplished. If the future belongs to humans, I want to help shape that future." Hassan considered the implications. Zelthak was one of the most respected military minds in the galaxy, with centuries of experience in interstellar warfare. Having him as an advisor would provide humanity with insights into galactic military doctrine that could prove invaluable. Accept his offer, but with conditions. Full psychological evaluation, loyalty assessment, and he serves under human command structure. No divided loyalties. Understood, sir. Hassan closed the communication and turned back to Admiral Vasquez. Elena, I want your honest assessment. Are we moving too fast? 6 months ago, we were nobody.
Now we're being offered co-equal status with galactic superpowers.
Is this sustainable? Vasquez moved to the star chart, highlighting humanity's current territorial holdings.
Sir, the technology advantage gives us incredible leverage, but technology alone doesn't guarantee long-term stability.
We need to build institutional relationships, economic dependencies, and cultural connections that will outlast any single technological breakthrough.
She gestured to the approaching alien vessels.
These species are coming to us now because they're afraid of what we might do. But fear is a temporary motivator.
We need to give them reasons to want to work with us, not just reasons to avoid fighting us.
Hassan nodded.
It was a crucial distinction. The Zektai Empire had ruled through fear and had collapsed the moment they encountered a superior force. Humanity needed to build something more durable.
What do you recommend?
We implement the Marshall Plan on a galactic scale, Vasquez said.
We use our technological advantages to solve problems for other species.
Terraforming technologies for worlds with environmental issues.
Medical applications for species suffering from plague or genetic disorders.
Infrastructure development for civilizations that want to expand but lack the resources.
Hassan studied the proposal, recognizing the wisdom in it. Make them dependent on us rather than afraid of us. Exactly.
A species that depends on human technology and expertise for their prosperity is much less likely to become an enemy than one that simply fears human weapons.
Hassan activated the room's communication system. Get me a priority conference with the cabinet.
I want proposals for the Galactic Development Initiative within 72 hours. Technology sharing agreements, infrastructure projects, medical assistance programs, everything we need to make humanity indispensable to galactic civilization.
As Admiral Vasquez left to coordinate the conference, Hassan returned to the observation window.
The alien vessels were closer now, their approach vectors carefully calculated to show respect rather than threat. Each ship represented a species that had learned to take humanity seriously, a civilization that now sought partnership rather than dismissing human concerns. His personal communicator chimed, and Ambassador Chen's voice came through. Sir, we're receiving priority transmissions from across the galaxy.
The Etherian Commonwealth wants to discuss joint exploration missions in the Galactic Rim territories.
The Crystalline Collective is offering to share gravitational engineering technology in exchange for access to our medical advances. Even the corporate syndicate wants to negotiate exclusive trading partnerships.
Hassan smiled.
6 months ago, these same species had watched humanity beg for justice and had offered conquest instead.
Now they were competing for the privilege of human partnership.
Schedule meetings with all of them, he said. But make sure they understand that humanity's cooperation comes with expectations. We want full equality, mutual respect, and absolute security for human civilians.
Anyone who can't meet those standards doesn't get access to human partnership. Understood, sir. Oh, and there's one more thing. We're receiving applications for human colonial authority citizenship from over 200 species.
Apparently, word has spread about how we treat the Zektai refugees, and other species want the protection and benefits of human governance. Hassan felt a moment of vertigo as the scope of the changes hit him. Humanity had gone from galactic underdogs to potential leaders of a multi-species coalition in less than a year. The responsibility was staggering.
Draft citizenship requirements and protection protocols, he said.
But make sure applicants understand that joining human space means accepting human values, equality, justice, protection of civilians, and peaceful resolution of conflicts whenever possible. As Hassan stood in the observation deck, watching the galaxy's representatives approach Earth with respect and hope rather than condescension and dismissal, he reflected on the path that had brought humanity to this moment. 3 centuries of patience and diplomacy had built the foundation.
Project Prometheus had provided the leverage.
But it was humanity's fundamental character, their willingness to show mercy in victory and justice in governance, that would determine whether this new order would last. The galaxy had expected humanity to bow when threatened with conquest. Instead, they had returned fire with such devastating effect that the balance of galactic civilization had shifted permanently. But, the real test wouldn't be humanity's ability to destroy their enemies, it would be their ability to build something better than what had come before. Looking out at the approaching ships, Hassan felt cautiously optimistic. For the first time in galactic history, the most powerful military force in known space belonged to a species that actually believed in peace, justice, and equality. If humanity could stay true to those principles while wielding their new power responsibly, they might actually create the just and stable galactic civilization that had eluded every previous attempt. The age of human galactic leadership had begun. Now came the hardest part, proving they deserved it.